This is First Encounter, a podcast exploring both the foundations and the future of historical romance. Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Encounter. My name is Andy James, and I am a historical romance enthusiast and author. And I am joined again, or for the first time, depending on what you've listened to, by Nichole Van today. I'm very excited to talk to her about her books. I say again because we did a bonus episode of the podcast that was released last Wednesday, where we talked about AI and how it's affecting publishing spaces and all the questions we have and no answers, basically. But it was a great discussion. So I hope if you have not seen that episode that you'll go back and look at that. But now we're here to talk about books because that's what we're all about. Historical romance. We love it. So Nichole is one of my favorite historical romance authors. I absolutely adore her books. And so I'm very excited to talk to you about them now. And just thank you for taking so much time with me, both the other episode and
happy to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, let me just introduce you a little bit, and then we can dive right into all the goodness. Nichole is a writer, photographer, designer, and generally disorganized person. I can identify with that. Though originally from the Rocky Mountains, she has lived all over the world, including Italy and the UK. She and her family recently returned to the U.S. after spending 6 years in Scotland. We're definitely going to talk about that. And Nichole currently lives atop a mountain in the Rockies with her husband, 3 children, and a feckless cat named Jane Poston, which is just the best.
She is.
In the world.
We got a cat so we could I live in the mountains. You got to have a cat, and then if you don't want rodents in your house, she just hangs out in the garage. She never leaves.
I love it.
She was hired for a job, and she's like, oh. No, it's nice in here. I'm just going to stay in the garage.
Jane Poston. That's the
Jane
best.
Poston.
That's the best. I love it. Well, again, thank you for joining me today. And before we even just dive into all the goodness about historical romance, I have to mention that Nichole has a new book out. And
I do.
When this episode airs, it will have come out just yesterday, I believe. So it's not
exciting.
out yet when we're recording this, but when you hear it, it'll be available for you.
It'll be available.
Yes. And she let me read a copy early, and you guys, it's so good. So this is book 2 in the Earls of Cairnfell series, and it's called Alas Beloved. And we're going to talk about it, but it was just Matt. I love it. I love it.
I know. Matthias is the best. He's a great character.
Love him. Yes. So everyone, we're going to talk about it, but just know that book is now available. So before we dive into your background in books, I just want to know a little bit more about your relationship with romance general and historical romance specifically. So when did you fall in love with this genre? When did you start reading it? And when did you decide to write it?
So
Small questions.
I know, small question. Literally cannot remember a time when I did not love historical romance. I can't remember when I first read Anne of Green Gables, which is a historical romance.
It is.
When I first read
Anne of Green Gables.
I seem to remember going through, I was probably 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. And I went through a summer where our library had Georgette Heyer, her entire back catalog. And so I read every single one of her books, in one summer when I was young. And I've always loved romance. I can't even remember a time when I didn't. As far as writing romance, I wrote a lot as a teenager, and then I just didn't do anything with writing or even reading really for probably 15 years. And I did get my degree my grad degree is in English, but I was rhetoric. I wasn't creative writing or literature. And I did a lot of technical writing. I've written multiple technical writing manuals. I've written manuals about teaching. I even wrote a manual about teaching. This is a fun fact. Fun old Nichole lore. I wrote a manual that was a freshman English writing course at the university level. And long story short, it won a huge grant,
nice.
6-figure grant from the Pew Foundation, the first humanities course in the country to ever win this grant award for the development of a freshman course. So that's what I did for a hot minute.
Nice.
And it wasn't until 2012 that I actually picked up a pen again and started writing. And the first series I wrote wasn't actually straight historical romance. It was historical romance time travel. It was
I know, and I've not read that series
Bridgerton
yet.
meets Outlander. Yeah, it was really fun. And And so it took me a minute. Historical romance was always my love, but it
Mhm.
took me a minute before I went into like straight historical romance.
Mhm.
But especially moving to Scotland helped with that. So lots
Yeah.
of inspiration there.
Yeah. So you did live in Scotland for a while, and
Yes. Yeah.
obviously great inspiration. And I mean, your books really feel okay. So you've written like 20 plus books now.
Yeah.
You've written a
I think the
lot.
one that just came out was 20, like actual novels, not novellas or anything, I think was
Right.
number 25.
Wow. Okay. That's impressive. I've written 5. So yeah. So you've been writing for a while. And as you said, your first series is kind of little genre blend,
Yeah.
little time travel. And then there was another series, Brothers
The
Mall.
Brothers Maldini, that was
Yes.
Italian, and it does have still a lot of historical elements in it, just the way the plot is with it. It's
Mhm.
supernatural, but
Okay.
it's contemporary supernatural is how I term it, but it definitely has a lot of ties to the Regency era, but Regency era in Italy during the time
Okay.
period. So it was a lot of really fun research and stuff that I did for that
So
series.
those are the early series that I have not
Yes.
read.
Yeah.
Um, Someday I will. Time.
They're
Time.
still fun.
Yeah.
They're still neat.
I know. I'm very excited because I love your
Yeah.
writing. And how did I find you? I don't even know. I think it was early 2025, and I can't remember how I found you. I mean, it was like Amazon algorithm because of something I was reading. And I realized I downloaded one of your books previously on like a free promotion thing or a sale or something. And so I was like, oh, I'll start there. And it was Love Practically. So I
Yeah.
think I'm getting that title right.
Yeah.
And so I read that series first. So that is the Penleiths. And then I went back and read your Brotherhood series, which is, I guess, the first
Yeah. It's first
real.
gen, second gen. Yeah.
Yeah. But so that is when your books, though, kind of really went historical romance and
Yes,
they're
I had a couple one-offs before
okay.
that. Seeing Miss Heartstone, I think, was the first straight historical that I wrote. And then, yeah, but it was really once I started writing the Scottish romance that I really
Yes.
deep dove into it.
And I love them because they're Scottish, but they're not like when I think Scottish romance, I think more kind of like Highlander, maybe more like
Yeah,
1600s, right? And so,
yeah,
but you're writing Regency and early Victorian set in Scotland.
yeah,
So it's like almost a blend of kind of what we love in these different kind of pockets of historical romance because you've got all the beautiful Scottish, but time period, it's a little
yeah.
closer to a lot of what's being written currently. And they're great. So I've read the Brotherhood series, I've read the Penleith series, and then your new series has 2 books now out,
Yeah,
the Earls of Cairnfell. And it's kind of separate. So those 2 series I mentioned are kind of
they are.
connected, like you said, kind of first, second generation.
Yeah, there's definitely overlapping characters between the two
There
series.
is, yeah. And I will say one thing I've noticed about your writing is you love some contentious families.
I do. Well, there's so much inherent
It's
drama
great.
in
No,
a
it's
contentious
great. I
family, you
love it.
know?
I
It's
love
like,
it.
I think that
Hmm.
one of the advantages of having written 25 books is that I'm more comfortable writing messiness. Like
Yeah.
it's difficult to write a messy plot. It's like not a
Mhm.
messy plot. I mean, it's really easy to write a messy plot. Let me be very clear about that. That's actually quite simple. But to write a messy, complicated emotional situation,
Yeah. Hmm.
it's much easier to have it be clear black, clear
Hmm.
white, clear
Yeah.
whatever. It's easier to hold it in your head. It's much harder to make it complicated. But
Yeah.
as I've matured as an author, it's been really fun to write these very complex characters and complex
No, it's
situations
great.
where there is a lot of gray area and a lot
Yeah.
of emotional stuff to be navigated. It's
Yeah.
fun.
Well, and the first book in the current series is A Tartan Love, and it's very Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it's so great. You know, it's the
It was
people
so
falling in
fun.
love from the feuding families, and
Yeah.
well, feuding's maybe a little strong, but well, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that was that was actually the setup. Like that was the
Yeah.
whole goal is to have sort of a Romeo and Juliet vibe between these two families and
Mhm.
then to kind of watch all that interaction play out.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. So yeah, I reread before this, I reread A Tartan Love, and then I read Alas Beloved, which is the new iteration or the new
A new
volume.
book. Yeah.
And it's just gorgeous. I love your writing. And it reminds me, so one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, because I always ask people, like, do you have a topic you want to talk about? Like, I mean, I want to talk about your books, but like, is there
Yeah.
something related to historical romance that we can discuss? And I loved what you mentioned would be an interesting thing to talk about is, for lack of a better word, I guess, spice level and how we talk about that in different markets and different reading groups and people who read whatever. And that's something that for me has always been a huge part of what I have struggled with, I guess, in terms of how do I talk about my books? How do I market my books? Because I feel like my own books are very at an in-between place. And your books, I think, to me are very similar. I group them in my mind with Mimi Matthews in terms of the way that you approach the spice, I guess, in that it's closed door, but it's very sensual and it's very accepting of sex. It's not judgmental about sex. It sees it as a natural part of relationships. You're just not showing the action, right? But it's still very sensual. They're sexy books, and
Thank you.
they're very romantic.
Thank you.
And
I just have to say, I appreciate that you caught all that, because that's absolutely where I'm at with it. I feel like when we start talking about spice level, like in my head, there's actually, as I write, there's a very distinct separation between sensuality and tension and emotion and sex. And like you can have all of this without having this. Like you don't actually, if it's done really well, you don't actually need the explicit content. And if it's done poorly, the explicit content isn't actually helping. And that's a reason why for me, sometimes if I'm reading something and I'm like, this just feels really extraneous. Like, I'm not feeling this. And if I can just skip it because I don't care about it, then it wasn't written very well in the first place. So that's just my opinion.
It's interesting because I read it all. I've closed door to open door to, I read it all. But when it comes to what I write, like I just don't write very explicit. And I've always struggled with how to explain and market my own books because to me, the way I define it, they are open door in that we're in the moment with them, but they're not explicit. It's like the emotions of the moment that we're exploring, but I don't like fully close the door. And so I've played with the terminology door cracked, like, like, I don't know. I think one time I said Mimi Matthews with the door cracked. Like I'm trying to get at that kind of same, because it's like a step further than your books and her books, but it's still not like, I don't know. And so I've really struggled with it. And because people that want closed door and don't want to read that, like my books might be too much, but then I don't want to put them in promotions for like steamy books because then like my books are going to disappoint. Like it's just kind of this.
It's so hard. And especially when you're talking about like in the clean book world, there is a list. Like there are very strict rules and very strict guidelines that you do not cross. And if you cross those lines, then there's a huge bunch of readers that aren't going to consider you clean anymore. And I might push right up against that line, but I know what lines not to cross. And so even though I personally wouldn't think it was necessarily, like it's still clean. Do you know what I mean? I know some readers wouldn't consider it clean. And so that's been a choice that I've made. But you bring up an interesting thing, which is I do read a wide variety for myself. And we can discuss, I don't know if we're going to get into it. I actually did, I think I mentioned this to you. I did a really good live with a sex therapist, licensed sex therapist. She's phenomenal, by the way. And we talked about this very openly, kind of like, because I think a lot of the reasons why people avoid spice, sometimes it just makes people feel very uncomfortable. Other times it can make someone, anyway, there's a number of reasons why someone chooses not to read spice. And in that live, we talked about how to understand when the content of what you are reading is actually impacting your emotional health as well as any intimate relationships you may have in your life. And so for me, I take this stuff that we talked about in that live as sort of my guideline. And then when I feel something pushing up against what I feel are my lines, that's my line. But I finally just kind of accepted I want to write at the spice level that I like to read. And this is the spice level I like to read, where it has steam, it has heat. We acknowledge that we're adults and we think about sex. Like, for the love, like, come on. Like, what 30-year-old guy out there is like, I have no idea what is even happening here. Like, oh, police. You know what I mean? Like, come on. That's my opinion. But I don't need to go beyond the door of the bedroom necessarily into those intimate moments, even though I do have books where, there's a fade to black and there's, an implication. And it might even faintly drift into the bedroom a tiny bit, like you said, emotionally or thought-wise, but never really crosses into anything explicit. So,
and it's so interesting because you mentioned, as you were talking about that right there, you were talking about, there's kind of a space for marketing and readers
Yeah.
that's called like the clean reading space.
Yeah.
And I've never used that term personally because to me, I think it implies that sex is then dirty.
Yeah.
Which
No,
I
and I'm
don't.
with you on that. I don't love the
Yeah.
term either.
And
I
so
think
I
that
don't love the
because
terminology.
it's a very natural, very, very, the word I keep thinking of is welcome. It's a very happy part of human existence. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's a natural part of human relationships, right?
It is. And it is a fantastic, wonderful, beautiful thing and should be celebrated and explored and not like shoved away like it's some kind of like, oh, well, you know, because it's not. It's fantastic. And we should just.
Right. And so I guess just how much you personally are willing to engage, like how much you're okay with, like you said, figuring out your own line. And I don't know. I mean, like I said, as a reader, I'm willing to read a lot. But where it gets me, I think, and this is why I think the difference, because people I know that read the spectrum like us, like I think it's what they're looking for is just a really good love story.
Yes.
And because you can have a super spicy book that is just as romantic because it's so well integrated and it gets at those emotions and it gets at those pieces. And then the books that don't do it for me as much are like, I feel like you think you need to hit a certain spice level and you're just kind of spicing these scenes in and it doesn't really either fit the characters you built to this point or all of a sudden something they do in the bedroom is out of character, you know, and it feels like it's there for the sake of being there.
Exactly. No, and you do see a lot of that. Like I feel like that's probably ironically, one of my hardest things as a reader is that I don't really necessarily care about the spectrum, but I really dislike that.
Yeah.
I dislike that I'm reading and we have all this great like chemistry or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, we hit X percentage of the book. I guess we need to have a sex scene now. And you're like, wait, what? No, that was not in the plan. Like I did not feel that. I didn't feel like that was organic. That just felt like you hit you were like filling an editorial need or something. And so I'm with you on it. Like it's a hard one. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think it's been interesting. We've seen it was Abby Jimenez, her latest one just had a fade to black. She didn't have a sex scene at all in it. And I think a lot of people were like, because some of her books have been, you know, pretty spicy. And I'm not even quite sure why she didn't, but I think she just felt like the characters it just wasn't part of the character's MO. It wasn't part of the story.
Yeah.
I know Christina Lauren had something like that too, where it just didn't feel right to the plot. And I applaud them.
I did that in my last book.
Really?
My latest release came out in January, ended up being kisses only. And it's not because I'm like, all of a sudden, like, I can't have a sex scene. It's just for the slice of the story I was telling. So part of it is, you know, time period, whatever. They didn't get married in the book, which I don't believe marriage has to be, you know, like you have to be married. But for those characters in the time period in which I was writing them and their values and how they're brought up, like it would have been out of character.
Which I have to say, I applaud you for that, because I think that is one of the hardest things as authors, that we are always putting our morality on our characters. And you can say you're not doing it, but for the love, you are. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're writing historical romance and your worldview is, I think casual sex is fine. And so you have this sweet virgin vicar's daughter who just decides to throw it away for a night and sleep with the rogue that's coming through the village. I'm like, oh, sweetheart, they don't do that. Like they would not do that. Like that, she was not raised in an environment and the consequences of that kind of behavior for her life, she would not do that. She wouldn't. Unless she was just a very specific kind of person that wanted to rebel or something. And so then you got to build that as an author.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you say that.
You can build the character to be the rebel.
But you got to think about that.
Yeah. But you have to do that. And so for me, you know, and it's like, and so I think in general, like I said, most my books are, I would consider open door. This last one ended up being kisses only, but open door, like barely. But it's interesting though, because other people, like in reviews, I've had people refer to my earlier books, not the latest, as kisses only, because I don't go into explicit detail about what's happening, even though it's pretty clear what's happening.
Pretty clear what's happening.
Like, I kind of, this will only hit a certain generation, but I did land on an example I like for my books is that they're like Notting Hill, if you've seen that movie.
Oh, I remember that movie.
Where it's like, you know what's happening.
Yes.
but like we don't show like the actual moment, but the lead up and the immediately after, it's very clear what's happened, and we're still showing intimate moments with them. And so I was like, I feel like my books are like Notting Hill. Like that's,
I
like
love that
that level.
analogy.
I don't know.
I
It's
love that.
interesting. But yeah, I've always struggled, like I said, because I feel like some people would consider my books steamy because I do discuss it. I'm open about it. These characters are having sex, except for the latest. But they have their moments. They have their intimate moments together. But like, I don't necessarily feel like I can promo them with like steamy books. And it's too much for like people that want closed door. It's like, it's just this weird in between. And something I saw, I mean, I don't know if we can make terms take off. I certainly can't. I'm not big enough. But I don't even remember where I saw this, but it was recently, like within the last month. Someone was like, how would you describe their books? And instead of just kind of the two, they had 3 options, which I appreciated. There was like, I think they said sweet and steamy, but they had an in-between term that was sexy. And I was like, oh, maybe my books are like the sexy books.
I like that.
Maybe I can market them that way because I don't know. But anyways, I'm going off now. But it's really interesting because I think there's a lot of readers who read all of it, like I do, and they're just looking for a good story. And the author I have seen, again, on my corner of the internet that I kind of live in, the author I have seen really embraced is Mimi Matthews. And I love that people love her books because...
Oh, yeah. She's fantastic.
She's great. I love her books so much. And I think because people... The comments I've seen, so people who read and enjoy steamy but love Mimi Matthews, the thing I've seen is that it's that attitude around it, right? It's like she's not showing it, but she's not shaming. It's a natural part of this character and love story development. We're just maybe not showing these moments in detail. And so I think I don't know where I'm going with that, but...
Well, I think the point you're bringing up is that we are allowing characters to be themselves. And going back to our earlier comment about, not like your book was just kisses only because that's what the characters you had written. That's what they would have been. But I think the opposite is also true in the we'll use the sweet, because I agree with you completely. We'll say the sweet book world.
Books. Sure. Great.
That a lot of times you're putting this morality onto the characters that we're going to keep it super clean. But it's like, that isn't the character. Like, they're in love with this person. They're married. Like, for the love, they're going to have a sexy thought. Like, they will, And I think for me, I just got tired of pretending, because I think my earlier books are probably more sweet than what I've written, say, in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, they're all still very much in the clean genre. But I definitely have been including more discussion of sex and stuff, I'd say, in recent years. For that very reason, I just got tired of, like, having to like toe some line that just felt very artificial to my characters. And like, they're adults. They're going to be thinking and talking about sex. Now, does it mean that it's crass? No. Does it mean that I'm, crossing lines? No. But you can have a discussion of sex without it being those things. And you can treat it as if it exists and people do it. And we're hoping to do it as characters. You know what I mean? Like we can include all of this information in there. And that, I think, is when you start talking about a book being sexy, which I love that term. That's fantastic. That's what we mean. Like, it's a book that doesn't ignore reality. It treats our characters like adults. And I think, I mean, I don't write young characters. My characters tend to be late 20s, early 30s, like up to almost 40 in some cases, even older than 40 in some cases. Because I struggle with young love. I'm sorry to everyone out there that met their like soulmate at age 16 and like has been madly in love and writes 18-year-olds and loves it. I know why this is tragic to say. I know why people write 18-year-olds, because they're so much easier to write because they're stupid, which is terrible of me to say. I know I just insulted like so many authors. I'm so sorry. But it's harder to write an older character because they're more complex. They've experienced more of life, and that goes right along with sex too. Like it's going to be included if the character is older because they are not so naive. They've thought about these things. They've been exposed to these things. Like even in a historical world, you're not escaping it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because the thing is, like we said, it is a natural part of human life and relationships, right? And it's always existed and it's always happened. And we like to think, like, oh, in the olden days, no one did it. And it's like, oh, that's not true. Like, that's not true at all. But I think it's interesting, like you were saying, with the age piece, and also I think just the experience piece. I've had it writing historical, and I write, the aristocracy and all that stuff, like, which is a whole other issue, but
Yeah.
that's another conversation. But, we love Austen. We fell in love with
Yeah.
these things, and
It's
at
true.
least I did. And so, I was like, well, how can I like set things up where I can write slightly older characters and figuring this out. And if you include my upcoming book, well, I guess I have a novella coming out in October, but the next book in my series. So like looking at my
Yeah.
first 6 books, 4 of them will include widows.
Really? I love
And because
that.
I was like, it's a way that like they've already
Yeah.
experienced some life. And so I can age them up. I can have them experiencing more mature emotions because of the things they've been through, be them good or bad.
Yeah.
And so it was just, I was like, it wasn't necessarily intentional, but I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I've written so many widows. Like, I just.
Well, first of all, very common to be a
Yes.
widow back
Yes.
then. Like,
Yeah.
very few people
Mhm.
like married. I think this was forever ago. I saw some statistic. It was like, if you lived to the age of 70 or something, like say in the 1800s, you had an average of 3 or 4 different like marriage partners over the years
Yeah.
because just they died for a variety of
Yeah.
reasons. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I write Regency and I was like, how can we make this the last book part of it, like why it ended up, because it's only 2, is my heroine was 19 and
Uh,
she's by
yeah.
far the youngest I've written.
Yes.
And it was hard. It was
Mhm.
hard to write that for me. I'm 42. Like whatever.
Well,
I
then
don't
it's
remember.
like there's a certain level
Yeah.
of just
Yeah.
like that. It's hard for me to
And I
capture.
set that up for myself because it follows a family, and so she's the
Yes.
young part,
Yeah.
and so like I said, I didn't think that through when I imagined my series, but like I don't
Yeah.
know, it's weird because sometimes we can control our characters and sometimes I feel like we can't, like they just kind of come to us.
It's really true. Like the number of times I've gone into a book with like a specific character in mind, like they're going to be blah, and then as I'm writing
Mhm.
them, the character's like, yeah, but, and it's funny because you hear authors talking like that, and it's like,
Yeah,
I made you up.
I
Like,
did. Yeah,
how can we
yeah.
not? And yet, well, I think chemistry is the same thing. Like I've
Mhm.
had characters before where I start writing them and like they have no chemistry, and I'm like, I'm telling you to have chemistry, and they're like, yeah, but we don't have chemistry, and I'm like, all right, so obviously I need to literally change one of you to have
Yeah,
chemistry.
I don't know.
Like so Nichole lore, which I know this isn't the series, it's my Pen Leaf series. When I first wrote
Okay.
that series, when I originally pitched it, anyway, it was supposed to be Ethan, who is my hero in book 3, was supposed to be
Mhm.
paired with Isolde, who is my heroine in book
Oh
4.
no. Hmm.
Right? The second I
Yeah.
started brainstorming that book, I was like, oh, because right after I had finished right as I was finishing Love Practically, I was looking ahead
Hmm.
and I was like, there was no chemistry there. There
Yeah.
was nothing there to latch onto. There was no story. There was nothing. And so that is when Tristan was born
Yes.
out of necessity. And
And
it was fantastic.
so I don't know. People listening may not have read your books here because we
Which
feel free
really you should
yeah.
experience, Tristan. If you
Yeah.
experience nothing that I've written, it
I
should be
was going to
Tristan.
say, I don't know, I think one of my favorite books of yours is the second book in the Penley series, Adjacent
Oh,
but Only
adjacent.
Just, because
Yeah.
that book did something to me. I don't know. Like,
Well, and the whole series started with that book.
oh,
Like
yeah.
it all
Yeah.
started with that book because I actually wrote that book as a novella first, and I always wanted to
Okay.
rewrite it. And so then but it would have been a very poor first book in the series. So that's why the whole
Yeah.
family got reimagined and
I
the whole
love it.
thing got
I love
redone.
it. But I think kind of just from the little time I've been in the orbit of your books since I discovered them early last year, the book that seems to really be like everyone holds up for
Yeah.
you is the 4th book in that series
Yeah.
you were just mentioning. A Heart Sufficient is, I got that right. Yes.
Yeah.
Devoted's the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tristan and Isolde. I love it.
I
But
know.
there's something, that book is magical. There is something about those two. And I think it's because it's when we first meet Tristan, do we first meet him in book? No, we meet him in book 2.
And book 2, because he didn't
Yeah.
exist in book 1. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
The Nichole book lore.
It's okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would have had a mention of him in book 1 if I had
Well, if you knew,
envisioned him
it's
as a
okay.
character.
I understand. I write series. I get this.
Yeah, you know how it goes. It just happens. I had to fix my mistake.
Yeah. So he is not someone we like when we meet him.
Yeah.
He's quite very stiff, has his duty, has his, very, and it comes into contention with, other characters we know and love. But when he falls, dude, it's one of those like a man broken apart stories that we love. And that book I love, like I said, Jason, but only just, there's something about that book that just,
Malcolm,
but
it's like, it's a heartbreak. Yeah.
Oh God. And when they're like marooned on an island together, like it's a whole thing. It's gorgeous.
It's so yummy. Yeah, it's good.
And
it's
I feel like that's the book of yours I see uplifted the most.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I really love this new series. And like I said, you got a new book out. So let's transition to that. So
let's transition to that. I love it.
Yeah. We mentioned that the first book, A Tartan Love, I would say of all your books I've read, that's the one that is like closest to the line of like the sexy, steamy.
It is. Well, and the characters, I'm giving a spoiler here, so you can mute if you don't want a spoiler. It's in the product description. Anyway, the characters are married though.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's steamy, but it is steamy in the sense, I mean, first of all, hands don't wander. Like there's no real description of a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's just, but the emotion is like intense. And I think that's a lot of time. And I think that's a lot of what the readers react to is it's like, if you actually look at the words on the page, it really isn't that steamy.
No, it's not.
Just that
it's not. It's
no,
just
no. But I just think it's
connection.
so interesting that readers describe it that way because I'm like, I feel like it's pretty like because I actually sit down and compare it, this book to that book and what I actually wrote. A, to make sure I'm not repeating myself, but B, also to make sure I'm keeping the level the same, And if you look at it, it's very similar. It's just that the emotion going into like the kissing scenes and stuff in that book is just like a gut punch because the longing and the yearning and like the impossibility of their situation and like the heartbreak and the difficulty and that's what we love, right? That was my whole goal.
So good. It's so good. And I don't think it's necessarily any steamier. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. There's just
the emotion is really, really strong.
Yeah.
And so when I always think of like sexual tension in the book, it's like a rubber band that's being pulled tight. And you want when it snaps, you want it to like slap. You know what I mean? You want it to have a really sharp like reaction. And that one, the tension is really, really strong when it finally snaps.
But this new book was also just I love it.
It's a quiet book.
It's quiet. But I love it. I love quiet books. I like cozy books.
So
I like, one of the things I've always said about my own books is I write more character focused versus plot focused. Yes, you have a great balance. You have a great balance.
Thank you. I do know if I had to err on one side or the other, I would err on character over plot. Yeah. Like that's definitely what I prefer.
Like I remember I created an Instagram post one time where I was trying to I feel like I need to know how to describe my books to people. Like, have I written enough to have themes, like things I can pull out? And I love a wild romp. Like, I love to read them, but that's just not what I write. Like, it just doesn't come out of me that way. And I was just like, no one's ever going to get kidnapped in one of my books. Like, that's just, that's just not an Andy James thing.
No.
But so anyways, all that to say, I appreciate a quiet book.
Thank you.
But they're both just gorgeous people. But I really love Matthias. And I loved him when we met him in the first book.
Yes. So Matthias in the first book, background for people who are reading this is not a spoiler. Matthias in the first book, he is the heroine's brother and he was born he's missing his right arm. Like right at the elbow. So there's sort of like a disability rep in the book and how that has impacted his life. And the lens, I did a lot of research looking at the lens through which disability was viewed because losing a limb in battle and stuff was different than just being born without one. Being born without one is like, there's something wrong with your line, like your bloodline, like that's icky. And like, how does he deal with that? I mean, he's a Duke's son, but also there's been a lot of negativity around his missing arm and how he was included in his family and actually raised with his family, even though he was missing an arm, which seems odd, but typically children with disabilities like that, a lot of times were farmed out. Like they were just sent to live with a caretaker and were never part of the family because it was seen as, and not all families did this, obviously. They ran a gamut, but and so he's a very damaged sort of, you take somebody who's already kind of shy and not awkward, but just shy, a little bit of anxiety, social anxiety. And then you give him this disfigurement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he just hasn't really reached for much in life. And so
Yeah.
this book is him deciding he's going to reach for something.
Yes. And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Not that I personally can identify at all with his disability, but I could tell that you'd done a lot of research. You treat it with a lot of care.
Well, and thank you. Thank you. Because I did do a lot of research. And also there's a horse element in this book that Matthias has an affinity to horses. And I did work very closely with a horse trainer to make sure I got all of the details right in the book. And she read through drafts. And anyway, it was really funny. There were definitely points in the book where she'd be like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. You got that part so spot on. It's exactly what you do in your training, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, thanks. I just literally copied verbatim what you told me. I'm like, that was actually you. I mean, I wrote it in my own words, but I literally took exactly what you told me and like just put that in there.
Wrote it.
So
had him say it kind of thing. Yeah. No, but you kind of mentioned two things that I think, and if this is too spoilery, just tell me and I'll edit it out. But two aspects that I think you really look into in the book and examine in different ways in regards to Matthias's disability is the family part. Like, because it's very interesting because he was kept in the family. He was accepted. His siblings certainly accept him. Yeah. But there was also, it was really like his mother's attitude, the attitude of the main nurse in charge of his care, like really damaged him. Yeah. Like, because it was very much seen as he's kind of this aberration, something's wrong, stay away from me, you're not like everyone else, And so it's kind of just this combo of both. Like he had the goodness where he was accepted and loved by part of his family, but then he also experienced kind of that rejection that's had long-standing effects on him. And so it was an interesting balance, but I feel like you examine both.
Well, and that was my goal. I feel like it's been easy in the past just to write a singular bad character that like causes the damage. And that's very kind of one note, very easy to do. And I wanted to create something that was more complex, where it was a series of complex issues that it caused, because that really is usually how it is in real life. Oh, it's not just any one specific thing or one specific person. And in Matthias's case, it is very much a combination of his own reticence, his own and then just this deep insecurity, with his arm. Well, and
sorry, I didn't. Just the other piece, though, that you do so beautifully, because time-wise of when this takes place, it's right after the Napoleonic Wars.
Yes, it is.
And so a lot of people mistake, you just touched on this earlier, but a lot of people mistake that his injury is a war wound, and they kind of approach it from like, you're this heroic person, and he has to be like, no, I was born this way. This is not some... I'm not this man of valor who, went off to war and so it's kind of like this re-injury to his pride almost. And there's a couple times. Yeah. And, there's a couple times where he's encountered with that as he meets new people. And even the heroine kind of assumes that at the beginning, right? Because that's what you would see in the world around you at the time.
Well, and it's a very common assumption. Like he's tall, he's athletic. He has kind of a military bearing about him. He's missing a limb. Of course, you would assume that he was a soldier and was injured in war. And he doesn't see that. I think that was one of the things. It's actually one of my I have reader questions at the end. I always do. And that was one of my reader questions: is that he's so hyper fixated on that fact. Yeah. On the humiliation that he has to say, no, I was just born this way, and then watch people's reaction to that, which usually is like, oh, because that's very kind of forward and not really something you would say. And he never once clocks the fact that like you just freaking look like a soldier, and like that's why people make this assumption, which isn't as awful, you know what I mean? And he just never clocks that, and it's sort of an interesting, for me at least, an interesting examination of how we always assume the worst about ourselves based on other people's reaction.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was really well done.
Thank you.
And the other kind of piece of this book too is just kind of the long-term yearning, and these characters, I guess, didn't encounter each other, but Matthias was aware of her for many, many years and just had this kind of, I don't want to say infatuation. That makes it seem, I don't know.
Well, but it definitely was a crush. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like this was someone
Yeah.
that he had seen, and this isn't too terribly spoilery because it is actually in the product description. This is
Very
someone that
beginning.
he had seen from a distance in London
Hmm.
and deeply admired her and saw her repeatedly for several months and never worked up the courage to talk to her. And then all of a sudden, he rents a house in the Highlands and she's
And
his
there's
housekeeper.
Cecily. Yeah.
There's Cecily, like she's his
Yeah.
housekeeper, and it's like, how did she like that?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then just coming to learn her story and her backstory and what happened to
Hmm.
her and him trying to just change enough to deal, with
Yeah.
life, but the wall still between them
Mhm.
because she is his housekeeper and that is a hard wall. So,
Yeah. But just that we love that long-term attraction, longing
yeah,
kind of.
he
It's
he
great.
falls first, like just
Falls
so
first and
gone.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. Even from afar. It's great.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, it was just, I really loved it. And I didn't, like I said, I liked that it's a quieter book. I don't know, because
yes,
there's so much internal character piece there
yes.
because it's a very deep into the psychology book.
Mhm. Well, it is, and it's psychology in the sense of like they're both on a journey of healing,
Yes.
and yet trying to write it without. One of my goals is to write historical books about emotional healing without using technical modern jargon.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
this book was difficult for that in the
I
sense
can
that like
see
I'm
that. I
talking
can
about
see that. Yeah.
horse training as well. And so that was probably one of the more difficult pieces is like trying to discuss these things without
Mhm.
using modern terminology or even modern techniques specifically without calling those out. So there were definitely
That's
challenges, but I love just these
mhm.
quiet psychological explorations
So
of
great.
character and love and relationships
So
in books.
great. Yeah. I that is the hard part of historical because I mean, maybe people are writing without wanting to comment on modern issues, but
Yeah,
I think it just kind of naturally comes out in us. I certainly have things I want to say in my
yeah,
books. And how do you say it in a way that doesn't come across then as super modern and takes you kind of out of the setting of the story? And
exactly. And that is a hard one. I mean, talk about putting your morality on characters. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah,
it is really hard when you write historical
mhm,
because there are a lot of things that you
yeah,
and if you dig hard enough, you can find the exceptions to the rule.
yes.
But
There's always
yeah,
a historical example you can find somewhere.
yeah, exactly. That's going to
Mm,
support what you want. But at the same time, it's like,
yeah,
but that was very rare,
that was
and you
rare.
kind of have
Yeah,
to acknowledge that at
yeah.
least in your writing.
Yeah, it's interesting because the next book in my current series that I'm dealing with, I'm writing it right now, and I'm very much trying to say I have my female main character. This isn't spoiler. It'll all this details will be out soon, but she's never been able to have a child, and
Mhm.
we know very much so at that time that inheritance and
Yeah,
lines and heirs was big. And it's just trying to comment, I think, as we see right now, our government saying, oh, women need to be having more children and we
yeah,
need to, all these things. And it's like, there's more to a woman's worth than her
yes,
ability to provide children.
yes,
Like,
yes.
that's what I'm trying to say.
I am more than the sum of my womb,
Yes.
basically. Yeah,
Yes. And so that's kind of like the high level message I'm trying to bring across with this book. And it's like, how do you say that without sounding
yeah.
all like modern day preachy and like,
Well, especially in a time period where children were really honestly how a woman was viewed as worthy. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And also, children were the way that you provided for your future.
Yes.
If I had a son who could work
Mhm.
and I would assume that I would have a place as mom, I would have a place to live with him. Daughter
You
may
would
not,
hope so.
not so much, but
Yeah.
a son for sure.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's interesting. I am a big Jane Austen fan. I mean, that's
love,
probably, I don't know how I started my love of all romance things. And well, as you said, Anne of Green Gables and
yes,
all these different,
all of it.
I've always loved the love story.
Yeah.
But I recently watched the new series, The Other Bennett Sister. They adapted that
Oh,
book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I could
I
do a whole
haven't
episode
watched
on
it.
that. But it's interesting the way that they portray Mrs. Bennett in that because I still don't think they made her a likable character, but they certainly, there's moments when she's talking with Mary and explaining, like, I push you because I had to guarantee your future. Like, I had 5 daughters. We're going to lose our, we've
Yeah.
already, like, your cousin gets everything when your father dies. Like, how do I make sure that you're protected, and selfishly me, that you can then take me
Yeah.
into, your married life once I need. And so I'm sympathetic to that. I can understand
Yeah.
that. I still think she's a bit of a shrew in the way that they
Yes.
they didn't like make you like her, but you can understand kind of where she's
Well,
coming.
exactly. The scope of women was
Mhm.
so narrow, like
Yeah.
what was permitted and what wasn't permitted, especially in the upper classes. And so your
Yeah.
options were very limited. I think that
Yeah.
if we're just speaking of movies, you go back to it's what the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, where you have
Hmm.
the Charlotte character who gives
Yeah.
that speech to Lizzie.
Yeah.
I'm X years old and I'm terrified. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that was very real to the time period.
Very
And
real.
very real. And the number of women that married just so it's like
Hmm.
my choice is to marry or to starve or to like prostitute myself. Those are my choices.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
a lot of women would just choose to marry because that was at least a respectable form of
Mhm.
prostitution. Terrible to say, but
Yeah.
that is a way to look at it, you know?
I know. I've got a novella coming out in October that's part of kind of a multi-author series. And my main character is a spinster, and not necessarily of her choosing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. And I still have 4 more books to write of my current series, but I've thought about what comes next. And
Yeah.
I really am interested in examining kind of maybe a series about spinsters and the different reasons
Yeah.
why they find themselves in that circumstance. If it's a happy thing, if it's not, it's, I don't know. Anyways, the choices for women, very
Yes.
limited,
Very
very,
limited.
very limited.
Yes.
Mm, But that makes it fun to write, because then, I mean, one of the reasons I love historical, I mean, I've only written historical. I have ideas for other genres. I won't say I'll never write contemporary or romantasy or whatever, but I really love historical because I think that social setting, we're far enough distanced from it that we can see it more objectively than we see the
Yeah.
limitations in our own social
That's very true.
setting, right?
Yeah.
Because we still have them, for sure. They
And,
feel
and I think
normal
that's a
to us.
very, very good insight, actually.
Yeah,
I
they
think that's
feel normal
fantastic.
to us now, but like the
Yeah.
distance, like I almost see historical the same way I see like fantasy or sci-fi, where it's like you can comment on current day things because you can tweak things or set up the
Yeah.
world just enough that it like mirrors us enough that you go, oh, like,
That's interesting.
it's enough distance to be able to see those things and comment. And the setting itself creates more tension and
Yeah.
conflict, I think, because there were such limitations. And I feel like I'm seeing more people recently being like, we're so tired of Regency. Take us out of the ballroom. We're
Yeah.
over it. And I get it. I get it. But the reason I still love it and I still eat it up and I like to write it is because even though it's absurd how much power the aristocracy had, there were very definitive rules along with that. And it creates these natural conflicts that I just love to exploit. It's fun.
I'm with you. I think that's one of the reasons why I gravitate toward historical as well, because
Mhm.
it's very easy to create what we call, the wall, like the thing that's keeping the characters apart. And they
Mhm.
were very, very real social constraints that they
Mhm.
experienced during the time period, especially if the higher up you were in the class, the more I think you would feel some of those social constraints when it came to
Yes.
romantic relationships.
Yes.
And it's really hard. And speaking as someone
Mhm.
who, I have a contemporary romance coming out next spring, and I'm looking at moving into writing another contemporary romance in the next couple months. And it's hard. Like, what is my wall? Like, what is, because like in a modern society, there's very little that keeps people apart. And the things that do legitimately keep people apart are actually things that should keep people apart. Do you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like, he's your brother, like biologically. No,
Mhm.
we're just saying no to that. Like, you're actually still married to somebody else. Well, you got to get divorced first. And then, you know what I mean? Like, there's no
Yeah.
real, the real walls that actually exist for a reason, and everything else is just kind of psychological or emotional, which in some ways is less interesting to write when it comes to contemporary, because it's like you're just too damaged at the moment to be in a relationship. Go do a few years of therapy and come back, and then we can talk relationship. And I
Mhm.
think that that's why I love historicals, because it's much
Yeah.
easier to take really emotionally healthy, really grounded characters, but there is a very specific reason why they should not be together, and and they got to somehow fight their way through that very specific reason and make sacrifices along the way. Like usually it does require giving up something in order for them to be together, and
Yeah.
a very real something. That's part of why the conflict feels real to the reader, is that there is actually a real stake involved and there's going to be a consequence.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it so much.
Okay.
But well, I feel like we've been talking forever because we filmed our other episode before this, but it's really only been almost an hour, but I will let you go. But I just thank you so much for chatting with me today. Everyone, go read Nichole's books. They're so lush and emotional and just, they're beautiful. They'll give you everything you want in a romance. They're just great. So Alas Beloved just came out, but she's got tons of other stuff you can go read.
So much.
So much. Go read the backlist. And thank you for just the thoughtful conversation that we had earlier about AI. Thank you for the conversation around heat levels and how that affects what we read and what we like and what we write and all of that. Yeah. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
I've had fun too. So everyone, happy reading, happy listening, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.